Here's Mark and Suzanne revolutionizing radio.
Well, good morning, everybody. Glad you joined us here on another episode of the Mark and Suzanne Show. I am Mark. She is Suzanne, and unfortunately, she will not be with us today because her star power is such that she gets invited on other radio programs. And so she has bailed out on you, bailed out on me, bailed out on the executive producer of the show, Jeff Johnson, and decided to continue her rise in stardom and gone on another show. I'm just kidding. We think it's a great thing that Suzanne gets invited on these other shows. It actually helps our show here at the Cerberus Radio Network, and it gets our voice out there more, because the reality is as we have in our opening song, opening music, radio needs to be revolutionized. It's just laughable what it is today. And unfortunately, it's actually kind of functioning as a set of handcuffs to people thinking clear about the problems we face. So we're going to talk about a great deal of turf today related to history, related to socialism, related to the mess over there at Facebook and Alex Jones and all this stuff that's coming. And you're going to want to stay tuned here, because not only are we going to be good at complaining, which is pretty much what most talk show hosts rely on today, just pointing out the obvious, Captain Obvious on Rush Limbaugh's show and Sean Hannity, they're all just able to point out how bad things are. What's different over here at the Mark and Suzanne Show and also at the Cerberus Radio Network is that we are offering real solutions to the problems. And I hope you're tuning in because that's what you crave. I do. I'm tired of just complaining, folks. It just wears me out to just complain. So here in the next hour, we're going to talk about the problems, but we're also going to offer solutions to them. By the way, you can join the program anytime you like by calling us at 717-467-1736. That's 717-467-1736. And our producer extraordinaire, Jeff Johnson, will put you right through to the audience, and you can state your claim. By the way, good morning, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I didn't expect to be doing this morning, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said at the end there. Not the beginning, but Suzanne's over there on K Talk. She's on K Talk this morning with the Paul Jensen. I can't remember what the name of the show is, but she's doing that show today, and that's great. I was listening to her before we started, and she's just awesome. She's spreading her awesomeness there, and they need to hear it. And you know, she's getting a bigger audience, and I know 3 or 4 times during that show she'll mention Cerberus Radio Network, she'll mention the show here, and that's advertising that I can't pay the money to get. You know, so because this is all out of pocket. And you know what? And people, listen, you can go to SoundCloud. You miss a show, go to SoundCloud. You can download the shows for free. We're not even charging you to download shows. You know, there's these opportunities out there. Listen to the old shows. There's lots of them. There's almost 100 shows on SoundCloud. I know there's probably 200 on YouTube. There's lots of shows available. Listen to the old shows. You'll get a good laugh at some of them, because we were pretty awful at the beginning. But well, thanks for having me to help out today, Mark. Oh, and I am very happy for Suzanne being there. I'm disappointed that she's not here, because she's definitely a lot better at this than I am. So anyway,
and of course she's better to look at than the two of us. And
yes, she's definitely got a face for YouTube where I don't. I have a radio face.
About you, Jeff, but I continue. I look at myself on the camera here, and I continue to marvel at the fact that I was able to get my wife. She actually said yes to me, because looking at this mug, I definitely have a mug for radio. So, well, folks, we got a lot of ground to cover here. As you know, there's a lot going on out there. There is every time we take to the airwaves. Why? Because government's still there. And as long as government is there, is it accessible to the socialists who seek to get control of it and then use it to advance their agenda, there's going to be a need for this radio. Folks, the problem is government. Now, that doesn't mean all government is bad, but certainly the mess we have right now, can we really say it's good? But as we all know, there's a great purging going on here the past couple of days over at Google, Facebook. I forgot the other one, Jeff. There were three major organizations that purged Alex Jones from their organizations, from their companies. So you can't apparently see any more Alex Jones on Facebook. You can't see Alex Jones on YouTube because of Google owns YouTube. And so there's this great purging of at least that sliver of conservatism. Now, I will say, and Jeff, I suspect you agree, I'm not a fan. I've probably a sum total of, an hour in the past 10 years. He's the type of conspiratorialist that I don't like because I tend to think he's wrong far, far more than he's ever right. But he does draw a certain group of people, and it's a large audience. I think last I saw, he's got over 1 million viewers, listeners. And he stirs up a lot of trouble, makes a lot of controversial claims out there. Most of the time he's wrong. Probably the most famous one, Jeff, I remember when, what was it called? Jade Storm down there in Dallas, where they were practicing, the U.S. Army was going to be practicing urban.
Jade Helm,
that's it. And Alex Jones was just guaranteed that was a precursor to martial law, and it was just a matter of time. That was going to be it. That was going to be the trigger thing. And he goes off on all these weird things. Well, that was 3 years ago, maybe. And I don't think we're living under martial law right now. At least I'm not aware. So I've always stayed away from the Alex Jones type of programs because they may sound entertaining and alluring and filled with possibilities, and probably some of them are true. But there's enough out there factual that we can talk about that you don't really need a conspiracy. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the program. There's 63 million dead babies. You don't need a conspiracy for that. That was because of a stupid ruling by 7 of 9 politically connected lawyers in black dresses. We've got $21 trillion, approaching $22 trillion of stolen money on future that are going to be owed by future generations. We have $4 trillion that's stolen every year out of your pockets. Why do I need conspiracies? I can actually quote the facts. Now, granted, when you put a fact like the fact they steal $4 trillion annually from you up against Jade Helm, where paratroopers are going to be, establishing martial law in Dallas. Granted, there's a little bit of pizzazz that comes with their conspiracy theories versus being stolen. Partly, Jeff, I think because we're so used to being stolen from. It's like it's just, well, every April 15th, we just send in our forms and comply again and just accept the fact we got robbed again. So maybe that's why Alex Jones tends to garner more attention than the facts that are out there on the ground of how wicked and evil this government is. And so maybe we need almost that jolt to begin to think, oh, this government's really bad. But at the end of the day, Google and Facebook have made a decision to remove them from their platforms. I don't agree with it, but you know what? I don't own any Facebook stock. I'm a shareholder of Google. I can't remember the third one, Jeff. Do you remember there were 3 of them that took them down yesterday? But I can't remember the third one. I don't think it was Twitter. I think it was something else. Gosh, it just keeps flowing through my mind here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what it was either. I know that pretty much every media source pretty much knocked them out. Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Here's one thing I said when I saw that, though, too, is, Alex Jones has made a lot of money over the years doing these shows. If his show is so important, all he needs to do is create a website, create his own media outlet, which he can do. Look, we're doing it right here.
Absolutely.
I'm doing it right here. Now I am using Google, but if I had the resources, I could open up my own video service server on the internet. If I had the capability to do it, I'd do it now because I get off of YouTube anyway. But he has the funds, the resources to create his own outlet, and his message would go on.
Yeah.
And that's the free market. And what would happen is the people that want to hear that would all gravitate to his new media outlet, and then the dollars would roll in on his advertisers, and it would sustain itself, and he'd make more money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so where is the problem here? I fail to see it. If he really needs to be out there and his followers are that dedicated, they'd be willing to pony up and create a new outlet. That's the whole thing. Now, we were talking before the show. I was saying that I ought to get a lawyer and sue Zuckerberg for billions of dollars because he is denying me my First Amendment rights.
That would
well, you know what, Mark? I'd probably win.
Maybe we should.
That's disturbing.
That might be a good stunt for Cerberus Radio, is to go ahead and sue.
Well, Suzanne has standing.
You're right.
She's been banned for 30 days. She has standing. Where I don't have standing. But Suzanne, you sue because you have standing, and just give me a little bit of money for coming up with the idea.
Well, and this is the sad part of this whole story is I cannot tell you, and you've seen it too, Jeff, how many people are claiming this is a violation of the First Amendment and free speech rights. And people will, sometimes they will be a little coy about it, and they'll say, so much for free speech. It's like corporations don't have to follow the First Amendment. It's in their business model. They made this decision. It's gotten them a lot of attention, number one. It's probably got them more militant support from the progressive left. And so they shored up that part of their business model. Again, emphasizing the word business model. They made a strategic business decision that, guess what, has been all over the news now for 2 days. And so look at the free media they've garnered for their business. Look at the affection they have garnered from the militant left and even just the middle of the road leftists. Oh, that finally somebody stood up to Alex Jones. This has been a smashing success for them. And yet, what are the Christian conservatives and conservatives' response? Jeff, this is a First Amendment issue. No, it's not. It is not. Unequivocally, it is not a First Amendment issue. If you are listening to the show and you're even tempted to let entertain in your mind that the Google and Facebook have violated the First Amendment, then you really don't know anything about the Constitution. You don't know anything about our form of government. You really don't know anything about free markets. And I would strongly encourage you, before you go out there and say this is a First Amendment violation, that you actually learn what the First Amendment is for and who it was for. It was not directed to Google.
Yeah, well, see, that's what's really interesting. If you're not going to pay attention to the preamble, and we talk about the preamble to the Bill of Rights, probably ad nauseum. If our listeners, they've probably heard it a million times, but it has to be said. You have to go to the preamble to find out why they did it. And it was to add further declaratory and restrictive clauses. And this is where I always start out. What are the first 5 words to the First Amendment? And if you don't believe the preamble, look at the first 5 words.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
What are they? Congress shall make no law.
Gosh.
So who's it at? Who are they aimed at? Mm-hmm. And it's not us. It's not granting us something. It's denying them something.
Key point. It is denying government something. Folks, we've got to stop, at least from the conservative perspective, we've got to stop this love affair with government. We've got to break off that love affair. Send the ring back. You don't want to be engaged to this. This is why, in their wisdom, after they've slugged it out during the ratification, and they were worried that this Constitution still wasn't strong enough, they put those amendments. They immediately amended it. Just stop and think about this great document that everybody thought was great out of Philadelphia. What is the first thing they do, Jeff? Well, first they try to stop it in Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island. They try to stop it. And then number two, when they realize they can't stop it, they change it. They amend it right out of the gate. Why? Because they were fearful that it was going to grow into what it has grown into, and it has grown into that. So, folks, if you have any inkling in your mind today, tomorrow, the next day, as this news continues to roll out, that Google and Facebook have banned, what's his name, Alex Jones. So far, as far as I know, Jeff, they've not banned anybody else. I think this might just be a marketing coup on their part.
And maybe they got together with Alex Jones. Maybe Alex Jones was all good with this, and he's going to make hay out of it too. I don't know. Again, it's business. But we were talking before the show. Here's the other problem with this whole thing. While the left is all happy that they are banning him, they're banning conservatives, etc., they have no problem going to that federal court and suing a small baker and bankrupting a small baker because of their Christian values and refusing to bake a cake. Mm-hmm. Again, it's just I don't know what's going on with that whole idea that we have to have a separate. We have two different standards here. One, it's okay for one to deny service, and the other is to it's not okay for a Christian business to, in their business model, to not engage in something they feel is wrong.
And this is something we talked about last week. I think we have to come to the realization and accept that the left has no problem being hypocritical. They have no problems having multiple standards for multiple groups of people, because their objective is not honesty. Their objective is not self-government. Their objective is power. Now, we cannot, and see, here's been one of the most dangerous things. We're going to get into it here in a little bit about misusing history, massaging history to make it say what you want it to say. We can't, as conservatives, certainly as Christians, we can't be dishonest. We have to be honest. Whether the chips fall the way we want them to fall or not, we have to maintain integrity, intellectual consistency, honesty. We have to maintain. The left does not embrace those values. And so we often bring a butter knife to a gunfight when they're willing to use any tool necessary to gain their objective, which is utopian control, communism of the people. And so if we can't even understand at some rudimentary level who we're up against, this is not a fight over constitutional principles. They don't care about anything other than power. So they will lie. They will embrace multiple standards for multiple groups. They will embrace hypocrisy. They will do whatever they have to do to achieve their fundamental goal, which is power over large numbers of people and command and control of an economy. Remember back to the Soviet Union days. Where did all those Soviet leaders vacation in the summer? In their Dachaus over in the Baltic, on the Baltic coast, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. There was all kinds of reporting about the two lives they lived when Khrushchev would go back to walk amongst the people. Did you ever notice he wore the bland gray suit with a white shirt and a black tie, because he wanted to be plain and just like everybody else? Look at his mansion over there on the Baltic coast. The people who perpetrate and use the existing tools of hypocrisy and lying and deception and constitutional rules to gain what they want, they often lead very good lives, while the people suffer. So if you're going to get on this battlefield and actually prevail and have a shot at prevailing, you have to, number one, understand your enemy. We can't hold them to any moral standard. They won't be held to any moral. They don't care about morality. Now, if I can get one thing through today to you, the opposing forces that are vying for control of 320 million people over a spread across 50 states, the two factions that are vying for victory, one side will not follow any rule. They will not. They will maim, kill, destroy, lie, cheat. They'll do anything. And if you think you're going to beat them with good arguments, they're not going to listen to your arguments. They're going to hear your arguments and laugh and say, those fools think that that's going to persuade me. That doesn't persuade me. I have an agenda. I want power. I want to control people. Now, sadly, the right, the conservatives, the Christian political activists have played right into their hands. Totally. They want a kind of what they may loosely call a better total control, but they want total control as well. And so now you've got both factions essentially warring for the same objective. One who has really malicious ideas and will kill a lot of people, the left, but the right has a sick kind of desire to control people too. And so they're both, in a weird kind of way, Jeff, they're both supporting each other, because it's not the objective is not shared. It's the method to the objective that seem to have some differences. But even in that case, they're just minor differences, because one wants to take back America to create a utopian communist state. I mean, they're coming above board with it now, Jeff. We're seeing all the reports out there. These people are not afraid to say, I am a socialist now. They have created such fertile ground for the last 5 decades that they're able to come above board now and actually be who they've always been. Now, I will say they've always been socialists, and they've always made it clear they've been for socialism. They just use terms like investment, war on poverty, the Gray Society programs, all these Obamacare. They've always been socialists, so don't mistake that. They're just smart enough to use language that's appropriate for a given time. So when they needed to build their framework for what they have now, they started with investing in people, caring for the poor and the needy, the war on poverty, a new mystical right to privacy that allows you to murder your baby. So they use all these terms that conservatives never know how to deal with them. And they create this wonderfully strong foundation so that in 2018, you can have, I think I read there's like 110 candidates that are running openly as socialists. Now that was all done in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And here we are in 2018, and they're just able to come above board. What do we say? Oh, it's a First Amendment violation for Google to throw out. We are so out of our league, it's not even funny. And then we wonder, well, how do they keep winning? Well, number one, we don't understand our enemy. We think we can reason with them. We think we can just make these great arguments, and before you know it, they're going to believe the Constitution, whatever it means, or whatever we believe it means, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. So we don't understand our enemy. We try to reason with them, expecting them to embrace our reason. We keep losing ground, and then out pops a movie that reignites people. This last week, Death of a Nation, and conservatives get excited again. It's like, Donald Trump's going to save the nation just like Abraham Lincoln did. And you know what, Jess? Here's what's going to happen. We'll chase that rabbit for however many months you got to chase it. You know, maybe you got to chase that for months while D'Souza rakes in his $20–30 million from that movie. But for 2 or 3 months, totally distract everybody. Have you seen the cover of the movie? You know, it's half Abraham Lincoln and half Donald Trump picture.
I haven't seen that, no. But I just want to kind of finish up one thought before we move on to that article, because you touched on 2 things I wanted to really talk about. First off, this whole idea of First Amendment right. We have to realize where these people are coming from. They are implementing all 10 planks of the Communist manifesto. And plank number 6 is centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. Now, okay, Zuckerberg and Google aren't the state, but they have strong ties to the state, and they have strong ties to socialism. So what are they implementing? They're centralizing the power over communication to the central authority. This is all part of their plan, and we can't reason with them because they are on board 100% with the plan. So, you know, I have it right here on my phone. You're not going to see it because of the light issues. But go look up the 10 planks of communism. It's marked in the Communist Manifesto. You can look at them. They've, to one extent or another, we have all 10 now in this government. We have a top-down command and control Soviet-style government now. So we're not conserving conservatism. We're not conserving liberalism. We're conserving our own brand of a socialist government. Now, the other thing you said was you're talking about our team saving the union. I got into a short discussion with somebody, and then I just left because I'm not going to play this game on Facebook anymore and tit for tat for 2 days over this. I'm going to say, listen, we have our brand of socialist. He's a dictator, and he's going to dictate what it is. And she was this person. I shouldn't say she. You know, narrowing the field down by 50%. This person was stating that Obamacare is gone, and now we have Trump care. He's taking care of it. Oh, so we're going to replace one unconstitutional act with another unconstitutional act.
And call it a victory.
And I said, besides that, where in the Constitution can he change legislation? He can't. So this is that's blatantly unconstitutional. Now we have a dictator dictating how we're going to change unconstitutional acts, and you're applauding this. I mean, come on, seriously. But we're conserving the Constitution. We're conserving our holy writ as passed down from God to our vaunted James Madison and
it's a let's say it's a bit convoluted, Jeff, but it feels good. Yeah,
it does. But this is we were talking before the show. Sometimes I sit here and tear my hair out. You know, obviously, I've been doing it a lot.
Been doing it a while.
But, why do we keep doing this? I mean, because we were talking about I have tech issues. This is all out of pocket. So why do we keep doing this? But because our listenership is growing, folks. You guys out there are advertising, and you're doing it because last month we had just about 15,000 listeners on Radio Co. That's just Radio Co.
Man,
that's not including what they're downloading. That's not including going over to YouTube and watching and downloading. But that's 3 months ago. Those numbers were like 300 listeners in a month.
Well,
so you guys are doing something, and there's people out there thirsty for the truth. And we'll keep doing this. We'll keep tearing out the last bits of my hair. I won't have a mustache before long, but we'll keep going.
Yes, and this is a good thing. Is that there are still a remnant, if you will, a readout, if you will, of people who actually do want truth, and it is accessible. Jeff, this is probably my greatest frustration, certainly from my side, is that it's accessible. If the left has done anything well, and they've done a lot well, if you measure that in terms of success of meeting their objective, they've done a lot well. They have a long-term view of things. They've been building this thing for decades so that here, like I said earlier, in 2018, they can come above board and say, hey, we are totally socialist, man. We are running a socialist. When we get control of this thing, you're going to get some socialism. So there's this, they have a long view. We tend to go crisis to crisis to crisis. Whatever it is we think is the most urgent thing at that moment, we will pour our resources into it and think, well, this is how you win the long game, by knocking down the small things little by little. Folks, they win most of the long and small things. Like Jeff just said, we don't have Obamacare anymore, but now we have Trump care. Why do we have any care at all? See, we think it's a victory because, well, we replaced Obamacare with Trump care. That is not a victory, folks. That is just another form of loss. And yet we are so thirsty for something that resembles victory, we cheer it on. Now, as you and I have talked before, and Suzanne and I have talked before, we're going to call balls and strikes on this program when it comes to Trump. Hey, he's cut regulation considerably. That's great. I wish he'd cut it to zero, but I will take the big cut that he's made. And so the more government he can get off businesses' back and our back, we're going to applaud that stuff. But replacing one, I don't even call them constitutional anymore, Jeff. And by the way, I've got an email I'm about to send off to Kevin Gutzman about our discussion we had 2 weeks ago on the radio program about perhaps this Constitution is actually de jure. It is working the way it's supposed to work. I'll be curious to see what Kevin's response is. I tend to think I'm leaning pretty aggressively in that direction now, Jeff, that the Constitution actually is allowing for a massive growth of government. When you combine a few articles and sections of the Constitution together, you get in there what might be a smoking gun that built into this thing, into the fabric of this thing, is the ability for it to grow and grow big. The left may have, you know, what's so funny about this, Jeff? The left may have actually figured that out before we did, and said, hey, man, this thing de jure gives us all kinds of power to grow. And so they have grown. Look at what we have. Now a win is Trump care versus Obamacare. Very disturbing stuff.
Yeah. Can I just read a little Patrick Henry here? And I've read this in the past. I mean, this is nothing new, but it's just what you're saying about it being de jure. You and I have talked in the past that we really believe that there was some subterfuge in this Constitution, that we would be better off under the Articles of Confederation. And I'll let Patrick Henry kind of go there. So it is radical in this transition. Well, let's back up here. Here is a resolution as radical as that which separated us from Great Britain. He's talking about the Constitution. It is radical in this transition. Our rights and privileges are endangered, and the sovereignty of the states will be relinquished. And cannot we plainly see this is actually the case?
Wow.
He saw it coming. He read what was going on. He read the Constitution because he was arguing against it, and he saw the weakness in there, and he said that we're going to lose our liberty and privileges, and the states are going to be destroyed. Now, in hindsight, looking back on history, who was right? James Madison and Hamilton in the Federalist stating that, oh, it's limited, they can't do anything. Or was Patrick Henry right that the states were going to be destroyed?
The evidence is clear, folks, and this is kind of the truth conversation we need to have, and why this radio program is, why this radio network is so important to you, why you need to share it out there with your friends, why you need to invite your friends. Yeah, I get that it's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about these things, especially if you're coming from a David Barton kind of education or a public education where you've been taught the Constitution is kind of a divine document, or it's very powerful and has enabled this kind of government. I recognize it's difficult to have these conversations. And a lot of times people get mad at me, Jeff, when I have these kinds of conversations. They literally viscerally get angry at me. And it's not so much because they don't want truth, is that they've so emotionally embraced a nostalgic view of history that it's kind of like telling them their children are ugly. You know, it's like, how dare you say that? You know, you just can't. You know, how many people ever go up to a newborn baby and the mother and say, oh, your baby is just not very good looking? Nobody ever does that. You say, oh, what a attractive baby you have. It's almost at that level of people feeling assaulted when you say the Constitution may have actually created this problem. And people literally, like you and I have been engaged in debates now for years with people. When we say something like, when people say The problem is the people, not the document. And then we counter back with, no, maybe the problem is the document. No, it can't be that. It can't be that. It's got to be the people. It's this kind of abused spouse sense. And so when I say the things I do on the radio, when you say the things you do, you read from Patrick Henry, probably one of the most, noted of the founders that pretty much everybody that calls themselves conservative have heard, at least of Jefferson and Henry. When you read his words directly, they're his words. People will get mad at you, Jeff.
The thing is, in the public school indoctrination is give me liberty or give me death. That's the entire speech. There is nothing else in that speech. But at the same time, they never go to the Virginia ratification convention. This is from June 5th, 1788, his speech before the Virginia ratification convention. And this is one of my favorite lines from this, and I'm going to read one more just because Patrick Henry hits it on the head with this. He goes, if it is said 8 states have adopted this plan, I declare that if 12 states and a half had adopted it, I would, with manly firmness and in spite of an erring world, reject it. Now, I don't think there's any ambiguity in his statement that he's read this document, and it is so awful in his estimation that he would reject it if 12 and a half states ratified it.
Jeff, that has to tell us something. And yet when people hear this, they're going to hear you and me say the problem might be the Constitution, and they will not hear what Patrick Henry just said, who totally agrees with us. We are totally on the right side of history here, you and I and Suzanne, when we talk about these things. Yet sadly, and I don't think many of our listeners do, but when new listeners, and by the way, if you're a new listener, hang in there. We are about truth and integrity here. We will gore sacred cows. Sacred cows have created some of this mess. If you're a person of integrity and want to know truth, then stay tuned to our shows. Yes, it may be awkward. It was awkward for me when I first started to examine these ideas and say, oh my gosh, how I remember, Jeff, back in, I don't know, probably 2010, 11, somewhere around there, on my radio program back in Maryland, I went on the air and I said something like this. I said, imagine how difficult it is for me to come to the radio program today and tell you that everything I used to know was wrong. I mean, it's like, oh, and I used to talk about those things on the radio program. And when you actually read what you just read and you take time to read the Virginia ratification debates, and you read the back and forth, and you actually study that period of history, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of access to information out there. It's very easy to access. You begin to see that there were people who were saying this thing is a disaster. People, I suspect, who you respect, like Patrick Henry, like George Mason. There were people out there. Most of the entire state of Rhode Island was trying to stop this thing. North Carolina comes in much later, a year later, after Virginia and New York. George Clinton is trying to stop this thing, and Governor Clinton in New York. We get told this story, and it kind of even segues into the discussion here about this latest movie out. We get told this fictional story about history. And it is neatly packaged, and it almost seems like all 13 states ratified the Constitution 100-0. Let's say there were only 100 delegates. They all went 100-0. That's not even remotely close to what occurred. The shenanigans that went on in Pennsylvania, for example, how their whole ratifying convention came together in such a rapid manner. They almost stopped the Western delegation from getting there in time to participate in it. There's shenanigans going on in many states to get
and then you had a letter from New York to Virginia that somehow was delayed for months, and it arrived after Virginia ratified. Now, because in that letter, Clinton told the Virginia delegation that they were not going to ratify, and had that arrived, and there's discussion. Now, who's the postmaster at that point? I mean, it was Hamilton.
That's right.
So, I mean, there's no way to prove this. I mean, because it's long gone history. But a letter that was coming from New York to Virginia to tell them they weren't going to ratify, while Hamilton, who is a nationalist, not a federalist, a nationalist, was the postmaster. Somehow that didn't get there until after Virginia ratified, and they would have been a no had they not had that letter arrived in time. They would have been a no. New York would have been a no. The whole system would have collapsed, and they would have been still under the Articles of Confederation.
I think, Jeff, if I'm correct, you swing 4 votes in that convention in Virginia, and it's not ratified. If Virginia doesn't ratify the Constitution, there's no Constitution. It was the largest state in the Union at that point, the most powerful state in the Union. If it doesn't ratify, you can check, folks. Again, the comfort, there's a verse in Proverbs 10, Jeff, that says, "He who walks in integrity walks securely." In other words, if you are honest about things, you never have to look over your shoulder and wonder, oh, is somebody going to find out that I was wrong on this historic fact? We're going to tell you the facts. You can check the vote count in the Virginia ratification. If my recollection is correct, it would take 4 votes to go the other way, and Virginia doesn't ratify the Constitution. It wasn't a slam dunk 164 to nothing in Virginia. You got Patrick Henry there for days, speaking for hours, slamming this thing, saying, no, we cannot ratify this thing. And and there was a battle in that state between the mercantilists on the East Coast and the western side of the state, which included Kentucky at that point. They did not want it. The conservatives, if you will, on the west side of the state did not want it. But the mercantilists and Edmund Randolph and some other characters there were able to marshal just enough votes to get it across the line. And so when we are going to tell you the facts here on this show, we exhort you, we implore you, we beg you, we cajole you, whatever, go check us out what we're saying. We're not here to create another agendized history. That's part of the problem. This takes me right into the latest movie out there right now by Dinesh D'Souza, Death of a Nation. It is a disaster historically. Sadly, Jeff, it has got thousands and thousands and thousands of conservatives and Christians all excited. It's like, well, finally, we've got a counter. Donald Trump is going to be just like Abraham Lincoln. You don't want Donald Trump to be like Abraham Lincoln. Let me assure you that. Abraham Lincoln single-handedly is responsible for the death of 620,000 people, the total wreckage of a culture, the total destruction of billions of dollars of property. Let me read a review real quick from my friends over at the Abbeville Institute. This review of this movie is provided by Boyd Cathy. He holds a doctorate in European history from Catholic University in Spain, where he was the Richard Weaver Fellow, and he has a master's in intellectual history from the University of Virginia. He was a Jefferson Fellow there. Kevin Gutzman, I suspect, knows him quite well. This is what he says. In case you haven't heard, there is a new quote-unquote conservative film out. It's titled Death of a Nation, Can We Save America a Second Time? Its director and screenwriter is Dinesh D'Souza, the somewhat pompous word-measuring figure who occasionally shows up on Fox to talk in pious tones about conservatism. He is the movie producer who, by his own admission, has done as much as anyone to shape, in an almost ahistorical manner, perceptions about American history and the founding principles that have supposedly guided this country. And in his latest cinematic adventure, he stunningly compares the triumph of America and its values under that great president and martyr, Abraham Lincoln, to the crisis facing President Donald Trump. Like Lincoln, Trump is saving America, quote, for the second time. Here's the film's official blurb from D'Souza's website. Not since 1860 have the Democrats so fanatically refused to accept the results of a free election. That year, their target was Lincoln. They smeared him. They went to war to defeat him. Folks, I almost just want to stop right there at that line. Jeff, what happened with the Thunder game? What happened in NBA last night? Because I don't even think I want to talk about this. I mean, just that line right there. Jeff, how do you even
I think I'd rather talk about baseball.
What's that?
And I think I'd rather talk about baseball.
Yes.
Preseason football starting. I mean, really, really soon. We got the all new CRN Sports Channel is now launched. I'm
hosting that show.
Truth in Sporting.
Oh my God. Oh, let me pick back up. That year, their target was Lincoln. They smeared him. They went to war to defeat him. In the end, they assassinated him. Now the target of the Democrats is President Trump and his supporters. The left calls them racist, white supremacist, and fascist. These charges are used to justify driving Trump from office and discrediting the right by any means necessary. But which is the party of the slave plantation? Which is the party that invented white supremacy? Which is the party that praised fascist dictators and shaped their genocidal policies and was in turn praised by them? Moreover, which was the party of racism today? Is fascism, I can't even say it, now institutionally embodied on the right or on the left? This is what the reviewer writes. Thus, the president who refused all compromise and torpedoed negotiations with Southern Confederates, who were, as D'Souza assures us, no better than racists and fascists, the president responsible for the most egregious violation of habeas corpus and constitutional liberties in American history, the president who, in effect, unleashed a vicious conflict that took the lives of at least 620,000 Americans and maimed and handicapped for life hundreds of thousands more, the president who, by military force, radically altered the original American Constitution and set the stage for the growth of a powerful, unchecked government and the emergence of the managerial deep state. That president is D'Souza's model and his analogy for Donald Trump. And yet, the reviews out there, the glee I read on Facebook, Jeff, is troublesome that they're buying this movie and saying Trump is like Lincoln. I don't want Trump to be like Lincoln at all. Lincoln is not a good guy, folks. I put up on my Facebook post a few moments ago, if you claim to be a constitutionalist and a Lincoln supporter, you are wildly misguided. There is, whatever the Constitution means, whatever it is, okay, I'll just accept that it's some kind of governing document. Abraham Lincoln is probably the greatest violator of it for this reason. Now, there are massive violations of it every single day and have been for if it was ever a concrete document supposed to lock down a government, it obviously hasn't. Obviously. Now, I will say he's the greatest violator for a couple of reasons. One, he used the power of the military against our fellow citizens. Now, it's being used now to go bomb brown people all over the place. But this is the first instance, well, not really the first, this is the largest instance of when a president violated his clear oath of office, if oaths even matter at all. Here's the first president who actually, here's the first president who takes the force of the U.S. military and turns it against people and kills them. Now, everybody likes to frame this as old Abe being the great emancipator. And they use that moral assuasion to take your eyes off of the fact this guy violated his oath, violated Article 2, because there's nothing in Article 2 that gave him the permission to launch a war. That is clearly in Article 1. And against his own people. You know,
Mark, I want to just take a little exception to that because they weren't his own people at that point.
Sure.
Because, okay, I'm going to go to this book here. This is Davis a Traitor? This is by Bledsoe. This was Jefferson Davis's defense for his treason trial, which never happened because the government of the United States knew they were going to lose that trial. So you got to read that because it defends secession. Once they seceded, they were no longer under the Constitution. They were no longer his people. He waged an unconstitutional war because no war troops into sovereign countries, invaded them, destroyed them, and forced them back into a voluntary union, which you got to read in there in that book that I just showed you. It talks about voluntary union. And so I'll take a little exception and say that they weren't his people because they were sovereign citizens of a separate and distinct country.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And thank you for clarifying that. Because if you will recall, there is nothing in the Constitution that binds us together in perpetuity. Nothing. Call me at 717-467-1736 and tell me that provision in the Constitution that binds the states together in perpetuity. In fact, one of the hallmarks of the first 30, 40 years of our existence were people constantly threatening to secede, states constantly threatening to pull out from the north as well as from the south. So there's nothing that prevented South Carolina and South from leaving the Union. And Jeff is exactly right. And it's a great observation. The minute they declared independence, just like we did with the king in 1776, we were independent. Now, the king tried to stop it and sent troops over, and we engaged in a bloody 6-year war for him to try to stop the independence. But make no mistake about it, the United States in July 2nd, really, 1776, declared their independence. They are a sovereign country functioning as one. They've got their own political apparatus. They've got their own military. Exactly the same thing in the South. Exactly the same thing. They declared independence. They are now a sovereign country. They have every right to throw every federal base off of their sovereign state. South Carolina had every right to say, pack up and leave.
And they exhausted every diplomatic means to try to get him to leave peacefully. Yep. They didn't just go out there and start bombing Fort Sumter.
Right.
They tried to get Lincoln to leave peacefully because they were now a separate country. They were in a union, a confederation, and they asked Lincoln to leave. So what did Lincoln do? He sent reinforcements.
This is so hard for people. This is probably, Jeff, this is probably the biggest, one of the tallest mountains we climb is getting people to understand that period of history. And yet here you've got Dinesh D'Souza revising history again because he's got some agenda related to nationalism. We're going to take back America. He's probably going to create another Take Back America website and recruit the hundreds of, or the thousands, hopefully it's only thousands of people that go see the movie. Because, you know, this is how the game is played. He's laughing all the way to the bank, and Christians are once again reigniting a belief for conservatives that, oh, we can do it. We can do it this time. Folks, this whole period, this and 1776, 1787 are so poorly understood by most people that engage in political activism that it really renders them almost ineffective, certainly against the left that has every interest in just gaining more ground. We keep ceding it to them because we make these arguments like D'Souza, we're going to take back America. Yeah, let's commit all of our resources to that. When we could commit our resources to establishing states or having states field candidates that are going to defy Washington, D.C. We could spend our resources there far more effectively. But no, we're going to take the nation back now, Jeff. This movie is going to launch a new effort to take back America and use as the kind of mascot the worst president in U.S. history, a guy that single-handedly accounted for the murder of hundreds of thousands of people in a undeclared war against another sovereign country. Folks, this is hard. I know you're probably, some of you are listening. If you're first-time listeners, you're angry. You're saying, Kreslins, you big dummy. You just don't understand what really happened back then. You need to go see this movie. folks, I know the time very well. I know the main players in it, just like I know the ratification very well. I know what happened in 1776. I know what happened, not exhaustively, but I have a good command of what happened in 1787 in Philadelphia. Jeff does. The people that are on this radio network do. That's why this is so important, what we're doing here, because we're trying to correct a narrative that is actually luring you into total ineffectiveness in a fight that really needs to be waged. So we focus. So what has D'Souza done now? He's got tens of thousands of Christians and conservatives excited about the nation again, saving the nation. And yet in their states where they live, Jeff, today, some number of babies will be murdered, and they have within their power to stop it in their state. But no, we got to save the nation now, Jeff. Donald Trump's going to be the new Abraham Lincoln, and he's going to save the nation. And those doggone Democrats, they're the problem, just like they were back in 1850s and 60s. Jeff, let's do sports radio. Let's just do sports radio. I don't know that I could take this much more, because I get the people that get angry at you, the people that get angry at me, the people that get angry at Suzanne when we say these things. They're sometimes, and 99% of the time, the people that are angry at us are fellow conservatives or Christians. It's not like the left gets angry at us. Now, they may fear us because they know that if this kind of truth, the actual truth of our history gets out, then they could actually lose 15, 20 states. And they want all 50. They're shooting for everything here. So they do know that if we actually were successful in communicating our message, that we'd probably still, I don't know, Jeff, I'll be curious to hear what you think as we wind up the program here. We may not be able to save 20 states, but I think there's probably still 10 that could defy Washington and reconfederate in some. What do you think?
Yeah, that really is the only thing we have left for us is a separation, a peaceful separation. The question then becomes, like with Dinesh D'Souza and all these others and all these leftists, is there actually a peaceful separation possible? That is really the only question today. If Dinesh D'Souza would have Trump be Lincoln, and if we did separate, then he would send troops. The problem is, you look at Portland, you look at all the stuff in the past, Ferguson, all these others. There's violence being committed. The left is left-right is meaningless. The Marxist socialists are marching ahead with their plans, and
they're violent.
There's only one thing we can do, and that's separate, because there's no peaceful coexistence. You know that Thumper saying, coexist. There is no coexistence. They don't want that. They want power. They want control. They want everything. They don't want you to have anything. They want to have everything. So I'm done. I'm going to get all the stuff ready to close the show. We got about a minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. So folks, you really do have to reorient your thinking. You've got to start thinking about saving the states that can be saved. All 50 cannot. Don't listen to Dinesh D'Souza and think we've got some new savior coming in politically. You need to think about the states that can be saved. If you're not in a good state, I feel for you. If you're not in one of the states that can be saved, it's tough. And my advice to you is move down to a state that can be saved. But folks, Jeff's got it right. That is the solution going forward. It is not trying to save the nation. They won. The leftist, Marxist, communist, socialist won. It's just a matter of how many states are they going to win in. Are they going to win in all 50, or are we going to try to stop them in at least 10? I advocate for trying to stop them where we can, folks. At some point when you're in a battle, you realize you lost. I don't think it's smart to just plow straight ahead and spend all your resources. Retreat, build a redoubt where you can. Folks, I'm so glad you joined us. I know this is a provocative show, but we're going to keep doing these provocative shows. Next time we get back together, Suzanne will be on the air with us. She's out there on a different program today. But I'm thrilled that Jeff and I got to do this and connect with you. Until we meet again, I'm Mark and she's Suzanne and he's Jeff. We'll see you soon.